good. It actually means computer monkey. They tell everybody, oh yeah, you'll have director in your title, like all the way up the ladder. Everybody's a director of something. Okay, that was a good introduction. Thanks. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about some of the artwork that I make. I teach technology in the art department, so I teach courses in computer programming and electronics. At least one or two people in this room have taken some. But approach them from a very different perspective than engineering culture, which is very sort of utilitarian, problem solving, does it work, how does it work, and I try to teach people how to play with those tools instead. But before I tell you about some of the projects I've done, I was thinking about this strange universe idea, and I thought I'd throw out a few ideas, and I'm sort of trying something here. This is thrown together, and we're going to see how it goes. But I wanted to think about the idea of strange and what that means, right? Let me start with a definition. To think about strange, we have to think about normal, right? You can't have the one without the other. So I thought maybe it makes more sense to think about strange as not normal, right? And so let's think about normal for a minute. Here's the definition. Forming the standard, type, usual, not abnormal. Don't you love it when a definition is not the opposite of itself? Natural, right? But, okay, that seems good. But I want to focus on a very particular aspect of normalcy, a very particular quality it has, which is it's sort of that it's from a cognitive perspective. It refers to things that are not noteworthy, right? Things that we pass right by. And I'll say a little bit more about that. Things that don't make a mark on your mind or your memory. So I want to borrow an experience from a science class I took as an undergrad. Everybody stick your hands straight out to the sides. Not behind you, but just like straight out, like a straight line through your body. You probably can't see your fingers, but if you wiggle them like this, you probably can. Does everybody see that? Yeah. If you have your hands almost in a straight line, you can actually see a little over 180 degrees with your eyes. But you can't see the thing that's there, you can only see the change, right? We are biologically, physiologically wired, and this exists in the eye, not just the brain. It's precognitive neuroprocessing that goes on. Where what's important to us is change or motion, right, in the case of visual systems. Why this would be pure speculation, but I am confident this would help me escape more tigers in the jungle, right? Something moving in my periphery. It at least is useful in that way. So, change, the unpredictable, is the thing that's not normal. We can think of the thing that's normal is the thing that stays the same, right? And the thing that breaks with that is the thing that has meaning to our brain. So we can think about normal in terms of the stuff we can throw away, right? The stuff we can ignore. We can also think about normalcy in terms of not something we don't remember or take note of, but something that collapses into a singular memory, right? So, anybody commute? Well, if you do one day, you will learn that if you do the same drive every day, it has a way of falling in your brain into this like one thing. You think back on your year or 5 or 10 years of doing that drive, and man, you remember one drive, right? Except for the exceptions. I mean, we have a reason that word is there. You have those exceptional moments. There was crazy weather. There was a huge accident you passed. You remember seeing his body laid on the ground. I mean, that stays with you, right? That's where there was a change, right? That's where something changed. That's where something strange happened. So this can become normal. Sadly, that's a state of modern life. And it has that way of becoming a single memory. And what's interesting about that is this would not probably be your experience, but somebody else has the same normal, has a different normal, the same normal, somewhere else, say India, right? He was outside in a traffic jam. They probably have the exact same experience of slogging through this on a daily basis. Another characteristic of what's normal is it's what you're used to, right? So somebody else's normal is radically different from your normal, but your experience of this as predictable and therefore something I don't need to pay close attention to is shared and it's the same. Anybody know this book? I have a young daughter, so this book is wonderful. So we're going to do another thought experiment. This one's a little off color. I want you to imagine for a minute that you're a deer. You guys, I want you to think about yourself You can wake up tomorrow and you're a deer, and I want you to think about yourself making a dookie. Now, do you guys know what deer dookie looks like? This is coffee. But you get the idea. A little visual. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to imagine what that feels like coming out of your body. You've never felt this before, I hope. You've never felt this before. I never felt it. But you can sort of imagine it, right? I mean, like, but for the deer, this is totally normal, right? Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to imagine even further that this is the only thing you've ever felt. I want you to forget what going to the bathroom feels like for just a moment. It's hard to do, but try. It's cool to have an imagination. If you can imagine this as so normal that you can actually, for a moment, now imagine what is your current normal as strange. Congratulations. That's not an easy thing to do. That's a unique thing to being human, to be able to imagine some other normal from what you're used to. But what you've done is given yourself a slightly new and fresher perspective on something you share with everybody in this room and in this strange universe of ours, right? I mean, this is something we all share, and it's so fundamental. And so having a fresh perspective on that is kind of interesting. So going back to this idea of normal, normal is really about forgetting. It's about what you remember and what you forget, right? It's a filtering process. It's actually one of these, but it's inside your brain. And so, coming back to the idea of strange, one of the most exciting things about the idea of strange is the power it has to give you, if only for a fleeting moment, and maybe you had it there for a second thinking about those coffee beans, to give you fresh eyes, right? To allow you to see with new eyes something you typically take for granted, and to appreciate its unique qualities which you had come to overlook because they were predictable. Fish eyes? Maybe. Mick Jagger with fish eyes? That's strange. The internet's amazing. Looking for fresh eyes. Oh my God. So this brings me to art. I'm going to show you a few of the things that I like. The reason why I make them, the reason I'm invested in art is because I think it has the power to communicate in a way that's very different from the persuasive kind of speech we're urged to practice, especially in a university. Not for better or worse, it's just a different way of thinking about something, of exploring something, of talking about something that I think has great utility. There's a trend in contemporary art today, I dare say it's almost normal, to try and create fresh eyes for a viewer in making an artwork. And that's something I'm invested in as well. And so the stuff I'm going to show you is work that centers around themes of balance. Keeping balance in my life is, I find, a great challenge, and I share that, I find, with many people as well. It's just hard to do the dance with all of the things you love, with all the obligations you have. And so I find that kind of fertile ground to think about creative projects. So the first thing I'm going to show you is a piece from 2008 called Big Top. Let's show you the video first. Most of the videos I'll show you are a minute-ish long. I was thinking about how in almost every culture, children play with tops. Right? They're this tiny little thing, and right about the age that they've gained the motor skills to spin the top, they've learned to find the world predictable. Here's that predictable and normal business again, right? They've learned what to expect from the world, and then you take this thing and you spin it, and all of a sudden it breaks the rules, right? It stands up when it should fall down, and that's really compelling. And I think something about that simple material defying gravity is really compelling, no matter what your age. You spin a top and adults stop and watch it for a moment. There's something really beautiful about it. And I thought, there's something nice about it. Can I like use that as a tool? Can I use that compelling sort of hold that a top has and somehow work with it? And then I thought about, I was thinking about relationships, again about balance, and I was thinking about how the more intimate you are with somebody in a relationship, the more vulnerable you are, right? And so the richness of a relationship comes with intimacy, but with it comes vulnerability and the possibility of being hurt. And so I sort of put these two ideas together, and I was kind of chewing on them, and I started thinking, what if I made a top that had this pull, right? It pulled you in. You were curious. It had the thing that every top does, but what if it could like threaten you at the same time? Right? Could I create that sort of sensation of intimacy and vulnerability simultaneously that relationships have through an object? And so that's where the scale factor came in. So the thing was about 6 feet tall. It's hollow, but if it was solid, it would have weighed well over a ton. Only weighs about 120 pounds. It's 40 inches in diameter. The circumference around the outside is 10 feet, which means when it was spinning about 5 rotations a second, right after you spin it, it was going about 35 miles an hour on the outside surface. So it was moving for a piece of unfinished rough wood. I mean, if you want a splinter buried in your finger, touch this thing, but people did, which was amazing to me. They would touch it. They were like, I can't not, you know, and so it had this sort of compelling draw that I was really pleased. I mean, it did the thing that I wanted to do. I had to keep it tethered for safety purposes because the threat would have been very, 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 very too real. So that aspect had to be dialed back a little bit, but maybe one day. So the other thing I'm going to show you, I'm trying to be brief today, is what it took to get it to the point of doing that, because it wasn't simple. It was hard enough to make the thing, but then to get it spinning was an interesting challenge. So I'm going to show you everything that didn't work on the way there. That was a failed spinning mechanism. That was a garage door opener with a screw. I thought, well, maybe I just need to wind it up and pull a rope off of it, but doing it by hand was nowhere near enough force. A little gravity in the mix, well, there's no problem with that. Then I realized if I pulled from both directions, maybe that would help. I get some weight, but then the thing's, you know, in the right direction, but trying to use my weight to lift these concrete things. There was a lot of fine tuning to do. This one. Yeah, it was an adventure. It was pretty fun. Anyway, ultimately we settled on this system with a bunch of pulleys and wrapping it and trying to start it the same way a kid starts a top, which created a nice tension. Will it work? So that was the big part. Here's another video from the same time. This is a balance study. This piece actually started off not being about balance, but rather about graduate school, which was an emotionally very violent time for me. You go to this place and you're sort of like, oh, captain, my captain, but you have all these different captains, and every one of them says, this is what's important, and the other one says, this is what's important. Of course, now I do this for a living, right? I'm like one of those people going, no, this is important. And it's very confusing, very disorienting. You kind of have to find your own north. But for a while, you're trying out different norths and seeing if that's your true north in a way. And so I wanted to build a big box, big enough for me, and have somebody like flip it, boom, boom, and have it like whack. And I was going to be inside just getting battered. I figured one take. Well, you know, between my weight and the weight of that box, nobody could lift it. Even with 2 or 3 people, there was no way to just keep it moving, and it was going to shake so hard that attaching a camera to it was going to be a problem. So I ended up putting these rails around it, and it evolved into something unexpected that was really nice. And then I ended up playing with this mechanism until I found something that worked. The basic idea is simple. The camera moves with the box, which is what causes the horizon to move, and so gravity stays where it is. Somebody was watching this video last night and said to somebody else, and said to them, no, gravity's just moving around. The effect is very simple. It's been used in movies. So if you've ever seen 2001: A Space Odyssey or Royal Wedding with Fred Astaire when he starts dancing on the wall, I mean, the set is moving and the camera's moving with it. So it's a simple trick from that perspective. But I built this apparatus, and then I had to just try it and see what I could do with it. And I had to kind of learn how it moved, because you, when you're in it, are the center of mass. So as you move your body, you want to roll. If you want it to stop rolling, you have to go back the other way. I was trying with my eyes closed.
Oh my god. Well, I don't like it.
Yeah, I put people in there, I put couples in there, married couple. I put, you know, people who didn't know each other very well. I asked them to jump in there together and try and negotiate it here. I tried to go over, I just didn't have the strength. Sometimes just totally lost control. Totally wiped out. And sometimes I got stuck. You know, it would just roll somewhere I didn't need to go, and it's sort of humbling, you know. It's interesting to build something bigger than yourself and negotiate it with it. But I mean, that's really what this balance issue is about, right? We all have things that are bigger than us in our lives, and by that I mean things we don't have total control over. Relationships, maybe you have a mortgage, maybe you have a student loan, just your classes, right? They're all things that are bigger than you. They're forces you have to kind of negotiate with. There's always at least one too many. So it's sort of, you know, sometimes funny and sometimes severe and sometimes sad kind of meditations on that experience, right? Here's a video I made last year, a different sort of angle on the same thing, of this idea of dealing with overwhelmedness. To be a young professor, this is the best answer I can give. I mean, it's not actually a joke. It's a very sincere thing. One of the challenges I'm sort of, when you point a video camera at something, typically you're documenting something that happened. A video camera usually kind of works in the past tense, right? It says, here's something. When you watch a video, it's something that happened, or maybe it's live, but it's always about documenting something else, and it's a very different challenge. That's probably embraced primarily in an artistic agenda, to use the medium to create an original experience, right? To create something that's not just a story told, but that's something that you live through, that at the end of it you're like, oh, you had this experience. Film is the best example, right? I mean, a good story that you get wrapped into and takes you somewhere else does the exact same thing. And so those videos are trying to do that, trying to create something that's an original experience. Even though you're watching a video, like at the end of it, you've done something, right? Rather than just listened to something or just seen something. And just in case you're curious, here's how that video was filmed. It's not that glamorous. Rope and bucket. And so this is the last thing I'm going to show you. This is a piece I just finished last week. As much as you can finish a piece that has moving parts, I'll probably be maintaining this for many years to come. In fact, I was just at the opening in Columbus last night at a really good gallery. So 2 years ago, I proposed a project to create a piece of furniture that balanced on a single leg and stayed there. So you take a chair and stand it up on one leg and let go, and it stays there. Except I wanted to do a sofa so that it would stand 6 feet tall. So I got support to do that in a fellowship at Carnegie Mellon University. They have a robotics institute, and so that was the perfect place to go, like, sort of knock heads with a whole bunch of people who know how robots work. Boy, had I gotten in over my head. I just didn't know it until I got there and started asking questions. I thought I knew how it worked, and I had the principles down, but it turned out I had a lot of physics and a lot of math and a lot of engineering still to learn. But I've come a long way in terms of electronics. It's been an amazing education for me, this project. Here's a video of it in the gallery. And here's a photograph of it, so it's a little clearer. So this is like an 1840s. I just learned it's a transition piece. It's post Empire, pre-Victorian piece of furniture. I didn't do my homework. Somebody gave me an education at the gallery last night that I found at a coffee shop in Eton. And I said, "This is perfect. I love it. It's the right shape. It's sort of a granny sofa. It's perfect." And so the guy sold it to me. I've been working on it for 2 years, and the idea was a sofa to me sort of represents, like, it's the most ubiquitous object that represents all of the things we build in our world to facilitate social interaction. Right? We build most of our world to facilitate social interaction. You're sitting in a space that was designed for that right now, of a particular mode. But the sofa to me captured, like, the most fundamental thing we make, as opposed to just fine, right? For creating social interaction between people. I mean, think of anything people do, they pretty much do it on a sofa, whether it's having dinner, watching TV, a job interview, sex, whatever you like. And so I thought that was a really interesting symbol to work with, sort of for the kind of fullness of what it refers to. And then I thought to stand it on end was an interesting idea, because this question of sort of like the balance involved in social interaction. Right? Social interaction is a delicate balance. Another individual is sort of the most atomic example of other forces you have to negotiate with in your life. Right? You have to dance with everybody else's will, whether it's somebody you love or a stranger you just met or somebody who's your boss. The technical challenges of this project turned out to be really interesting. If it falls, because it's really just standing on a single point, if it falls, it needs to not break. And so the way I solved that was all of the individual pieces assemble with magnets, so that if it falls, it kind of just pops apart. And so I don't have a video of it falling because I don't have the guts to make it fall yet. I just got in the first show. But I'll show you what it looks like going together. So there's 2 motors there in an aluminum cage. Where the magnets kind of pop together. Most of the sofa got remade with polyethylene foam, very light density, but sort of structural material. And then there's a tool that kind of supports it, where it needs support while it's down, and once it's up, everything's sort of in line and self-supporting. You have to find the balance point and turn it on, and it stays. Sorry, the lighting is not so great in this video. And people usually ask me how it works, and the short version is, if you pop a wheelie on a bicycle, you're putting torque on that wheel. That makes it rotate forward, but it also rotates the frame of the bicycle backwards, right? And so in the same way, like, this guy sort of does a little, he's got a motor inside with some mass around it, and so when the mass gets rotated, it also rotates the sofa that's holding the mass, and that causes a little rotation in the body of the sofa, and with the foot fixed on the ground, that causes that rotation, causes it to go back and forth. And it does that in both X and Y dimensions, and it has sensors on board that kind of know what its angle is. That's the short explanation for the curious. And that's where I'm going to stop. I think I'm done.